Imagine paying over $1,000 for a single record, and not just any record, but one that captures one of the most chaotic, controversial, and downright insane eras in rock history. For years, Guns N' Roses' only official live album, Live Era 87 to 93, has been nearly impossible to find without dropping a small fortune. But now, it's finally coming back. What most fans don't realize, though, is that behind this reissue lies a story of riots that turned violent, bandmates walking off stage mid-song, and even a moment where Slash was declared clinically dead before being brought back to life. This wasn't just a tour, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and somehow, it all ended up immortalized on one of the rarest records in rock, the Rarity and Reissue. For years, Live Era 87 to 93 has been one of those albums that hardcore fans whispered about, a hidden treasure more than a piece of music. The original vinyl pressing, released back in 1999, vanished almost instantly, and because the band never reissued it, copies became a collector's dream or nightmare. On sites like Discogs, the few that surfaced would sell for jaw-dropping prices, sometimes $300, sometimes over $1,000. Imagine handing over four figures just to own one album. That's how rare it was. So when news broke that Guns N' Roses were finally bringing it back, fans exploded. For the first time in decades, you don't need to be a diehard collector with deep pockets. The reissue is being released as a massive 4 LP set, black vinyl for just under $80 and multicolored vinyl for around $100. To most fans, that price feels like nothing compared to what it used to cost just to even see one on the market. But the reason this reissue matters isn't just the price tag. It's the history sealed inside those grooves. Live Era doesn't just capture a band at their peak. It captures them at their most unpredictable, when chaos seemed to follow them every single night. And that story begins long before this record ever hit the shelves, recording the chaos. What makes Live Era 87 to 93 so fascinating is that it isn't just any live album. It's a time capsule of the most turbulent years in Guns N' Roses history. Unlike most bands, who record one or two concerts and polish them for release, GNR pieced this record together from dozens of shows spread across the globe. The liner notes cheekily claimed it was recorded across the universe, but most of the tracks came from the infamous Use Your Illusion tour, a tour that wasn't just long, it was chaotic, dangerous, and downright historic. Between 1991 and 1993, the band played nearly 200 shows in over 24 countries. But what fans remember most isn't just the music, it's the madness that happened on and off stage. And that's the strange beauty of Live Era. These performances don't sound squeaky clean. They sound raw, gritty, and unpredictable, exactly like the band itself. You hear the crowd roaring, Axl's voice cracking from exhaustion, Slash's solos stretching into wild improvisations. It feels less like a polished release and more like a direct portal into a moment when Guns N' Roses were ruling the world and simultaneously falling apart. Every track on the album carries that tension. The energy is undeniable, but so is the chaos bubbling underneath. And to understand why that matters, you have to look at the tour itself, the wild string of shows that gave us some of the most legendary and notorious moments in rock history. Early tour highlights. When the Use Your Illusion era officially began, it wasn't just another tour. It was the moment Guns N' Roses went from being the most dangerous band in the world to the biggest. The first signs of that came in January 1991, when they headlined Rock in Rio 2 in front of hundreds of thousands of fans. It was more than a concert, it was a coronation. New drummer Matt Sorum and keyboardist Dizzy Reed made their live debuts, and the band tore through songs from the yet-to-be-released Use Your Illusion albums. By the end of the night, it was clear Guns N' Roses weren't just an opening act anymore. They were headliners on the global stage. But if Rock in Rio was the triumphant beginning, the very next steps hinted at the chaos ahead. During a warm-up show at New York's Ritz, Axl Rose launched himself off a speaker during You Could Be Mine and came crashing down with a broken foot. He laughed it off, joking to the crowd, "I think I just broke a leg." But it was a sign of things to come. Injuries, accidents, and constant drama would follow the band everywhere they went. Even so, the tour kicked off at full throttle. At Alpine Valley in Wisconsin, Axl performed in a giant cast, sprinting across the stage like nothing had happened. The band blasted through new songs no one had ever heard before, and somehow the crowd already knew the words. Within weeks, fans weren't just watching a concert, they were witnessing history. It was only the beginning, because as the shows grew bigger, the controversies grew louder. And the trouble that followed would soon push Guns N' Roses into some of the darkest, most infamous moments of their career. Infamous meltdowns and riots. If the early shows proved Guns N' Roses could command stadiums, the next chapter proved just how volatile that power could be. No moment captures it better than what happened on July 2nd, 1991, in St. Louis. Midway through the set, Axl Rose spotted a fan snapping pictures with a camera. Security didn't move fast enough, so Axl leapt straight into the crowd himself. Moments later, he stormed back on stage, snarled, "Thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home," and smashed his mic before walking off. The rest of the band followed. The crowd? They didn't take it quietly. Chaos erupted. Fans tore apart the Riverport Amphitheater, flipping seats, breaking equipment, and leaving behind hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. Dozens of people were injured, and Rose was slapped with charges for inciting a riot.
And Guns frontman Axl Rose abruptly ended his band's set with some ominous comments about the band's future.
It became one of the most infamous moments in rock history, and the shadow of it followed him for years. But that wasn't the only disaster. Just a year later in Montreal, Guns N' Roses were co-headlining with Metallica when disaster struck. James Hetfield suffered severe burns from a pyro accident, and GNR were expected to save the night. Instead, they showed up late, played for less than an hour, and then Axl walked off complaining of throat problems. The audience snapped. Cars were overturned, fires were set, windows smashed. Another full-scale riot in the name of Guns N' Roses. These weren't isolated incidents. Show after show, Rose's short fuse turned concerts into battlegrounds. Fans getting dragged on stage, fights breaking out, bottles flying. It was all part of the nightly gamble of seeing GNR live. And as dangerous as it was, the chaos only made the band more notorious. The riots might have grabbed the headlines, but behind the scenes, something even more destructive was happening. The band itself was starting to come apart. Band implosions. As the riots and walk-offs made headlines, the real cracks were showing within the band itself. Guns N' Roses weren't just battling the audience, they were battling each other. The first major fracture came in August 1991. Guitarist Izzy Stradlin, one of the founding members and the steady hand behind much of the band's songwriting, played his final show with GNR at Wembley Stadium. Just months later, he officially quit. His reason? He couldn't handle Axl Rose's growing control over the band or the endless cycle of dysfunction. Izzy had gotten sober, and what he saw around him didn't line up with his new life. In his words, being in Guns N' Roses had started to feel like playing with zombies. To replace him, the band brought in Gilby Clarke. The catch? He had only a week to cram decades of songs into memory before stepping on stage in front of tens of thousands of fans. Somehow, he pulled it off, but it was a clear sign the band was operating on chaos rather than stability. And then came Slash's brush with death. By 1992, the guitarist was spiraling deeper into addiction. One night in San Francisco, after a drug binge, his heart simply stopped. For 8 minutes, Slash was gone, clinically dead, before paramedics managed to revive him. Most people would take that as a wake-up call. Slash? He signed himself out of the hospital the same day and flew to the next show. The band didn't slow down, even when lives were literally on the line. The constant tension, near-death experiences, and lineup changes turned GNR into a ticking time bomb. And if the fights inside the band weren't enough, they still had a habit of picking battles outside it, with other rock stars, rival bands, and sometimes entire cities. Celebrity clashes and bizarre moments.
And Courtney and I just jokingly said, "Axl, will you be the godfather of our child?"
If the riots and walk-offs weren't enough, Guns N' Roses also had a habit of turning their feuds into public spectacles. And during the Use Your Illusion era, no feud was louder than Axl Rose versus Kurt Cobain. It all started when Nirvana turned down an offer to open for GNR on tour. Axl didn't take the rejection well. At a Florida show, he blasted Cobain from the stage, calling him a junkie with a junkie wife, and even making cruel remarks about their newborn daughter. Cobain and Courtney Love hit back in classic fashion, mocking Rose at the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards. Courtney shouted across the red carpet, "Axel, will you be the godfather of our child?" Axel, surrounded by bodyguards, snapped back at Cobain, threatening to take him down to the pavement. Cobain didn't flinch. Instead, he turned to Courtney and yelled, "Shut up, bitch," in mock compliance, drawing laughs from everyone around. Dave Grohl twisted the knife further by leaning into the mic during Nirvana's set and repeatedly shouting, "Hi, Axel," in front of millions of viewers. It was rock's most infamous backstage feud, played out live for the world to see. But it wasn't just Nirvana. Faith No More frontman Mike Patton spent the band's time opening for GNR, dreaming up ways to get revenge for what he called miserable treatment. His most notorious stunt? Walking up to Axel's teleprompter and relieving himself on it. For Patton, it was childish payback. But for fans, it became one more outrageous story in a tour already full of them. And then there were the moments of sheer absurdity, the kind that made GNR shows feel like a circus. Blind Melon's Shannon Hoon, a close friend of Axel's, once stormed on stage completely naked, carrying a pizza, and handed it to the band in front of tens of thousands of people. Instead of stopping the show, he stuck around and played bongos with them, still unclothed, while the crowd went wild. That was the essence of Guns N' Roses in those years. Part chaos, part comedy, and always unpredictable. But as much as the madness kept fans talking, there was still one final chapter to this story. The last shows, the end of an era, and the reason Live Era 87 to 93 would become the only official live album the band would ever release. The legacy of Live Era.
It'd been measured a lot against, singing it, and there's nothing I can.
By the summer of 1993, after more than 2 years, nearly 200 shows, and countless scandals, the Use Your Illusion tour finally came to a close in Buenos Aires. That night, July 17th, wasn't just another concert. It was history in the making. Because when Axl, Slash, and Duff walked off that stage, it would be the last time they played together for almost 23 years. The Buenos Aires finale felt like both a victory lap and a funeral. The band tore through classics from Appetite for Destruction, unleashed the epics from Use Your Illusion, and even slipped in bizarre moments of humor, like drummer Cozy Powell showing up in a Domino's delivery uniform to deliver pizza on stage. But underneath the spectacle was a sense that something was ending. The fights, the addictions, the walkouts. It had finally pushed the band to the breaking point. Years later, when Live Era 87 to 93 finally came out in 1999, fans realized it wasn't just another live album. It was a snapshot of a band that had burned brighter and wilder than almost anyone else in rock. The raw recordings captured the roar of stadiums, the tension of a band on the edge, and the magic that somehow survived in spite of it all. That's why this reissue feels bigger than just another vinyl release. It's not just about owning a record. It's about holding a piece of history, a time capsule of riots, broken bones, celebrity feuds, near-death experiences, and some of the most powerful live performances ever put to tape. For the fans who lived through it, it's a reminder of the madness. For younger generations, it's a chance to experience the closest thing to seeing Guns N' Roses at their most dangerous. And for the band itself, it's proof that no matter how much chaos surrounded them, the music still cut through and left a legacy no one can ignore. So what makes Live Era 87 to 93 more than just another live album? It's the soundtrack of a band at war, with the world, with their fans, and with themselves. Every note, every scream, every crack in Axl's voice is proof that Guns N' Roses weren't just performing, they were surviving. That's why this reissue feels so important. It's not simply vinyl pressed onto wax. It's a time machine back to the wildest years of one of the most dangerous bands on Earth. And while the chaos nearly destroyed them, it also gave us moments that can never be repeated. The real question is, will Guns N' Roses ever burn that brightly or that recklessly again? Or was Live Era the final snapshot of a band that could only exist in the firestorm of the early 90s?